Today's episode is brought to you in part by Amazon. Everyone loves the convenience of shopping from home. Amazon helps you do just that. Shopping for new computer components, the best gaming peripherals, or even pre-built PCs, there are always new and interesting finds on Amazon. Right now, you can get free 2-day shipping with a free trial of Amazon Prime that you can cancel anytime. I got Amazon Prime. It's pretty awesome. Plus, you can help support Defense of the Patients by visiting defenseofthepatients.com and clicking through the Amazon banner on our website. Just click the banner and do your shopping. No additional charge to you, and Amazon provides support to Defense of the Patients just for telling them we sent you. So remember, before you shop Amazon, visit defenseofthepatients.com and click on the Amazon banner on our website to support the show at zero additional cost to you. Thanks, guys. Now here's the show. All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the DotPro show with BreakyCPK. I am BreakyCPK, and I'm excited to be here once again. Hopefully you're having a good day yourselves. I know I am, definitely. I'm actually going to be looking forward to a vacation I got coming up here. I'm going to be taking off next week. I'm going to be going to Chicago. Going to be hanging out in Chicago, myself and my wife. We're going to be just spending a good 4 or 5 days together over there in the beautiful city of Chicago. I've actually never been, despite living so close. I live about 2 hour, just 2.5 hour drive from it. So, but I've never actually been to the city. So, no, I'm looking forward to that. But again, that's next week. And also, it is vacation, but I no doubt we'll be watching some Dota, as of course the epicenter will be happening during that week as well. But as far as this show is concerned, guys, I'm excited to be here for this, and we got plenty to talk about. I'm going to be joined by a couple of guests throughout the show. Bill from the Beat organization is going to be joining me later on. We're going to be discussing third-party tournaments. He actually made a Reddit post recently about third-party tournaments and what needs to be done to help sustain them. I'm going to have him on to discuss that. Tsunami is going to be joining me shortly here as well. Good buddy of mine. I happen to co-cast with him quite often. He's also just a great character in general, personality in the competitive Dota 2 scene, or let alone Dota 2 in general. He posts some funny YouTube videos and stuff, and just a good guy, and definitely plan to sit down and talk with him about really everything that's been going on throughout this last week right here when it comes to results in the Zotac Cup, the Manila Masters, of course, and even previewing the Epicenter event coming up, as well as talking about patch 7.06c a little bit. There was definitely some changes in there that's at least worth discussing. So, also, there's plenty more roster updates. As we mentioned, the roster deadline got extended by Valve. So, there's been a couple of changes / pickups by teams since that happened, and we'll get into those later on in the competitive surge, actually. But before we get into all of that, I'd like to start with the segment that I like to call the good, the bad, and the ugly. As far as the good is concerned, starting positive right here, we got North American Dota. That is right. Now, yes, I happen to be from North America, so I know right off the bat you're saying, "Oh, come on, Breaky, that's just biased." Well, hear me out here. North American Dota is actually feels like it's in a pretty good spot right now, and I say that because of several results lately, most specifically with the Manila Masters that just happened, actually. With the Manila Masters, EG, in case you just haven't heard yet, EG, Evil Geniuses, they won the Manila Masters here, claiming the title. They beat Newbie in the grand finals 3-1, and thus becoming champion. So, obviously, something to be proud of there. And I know EG, as a team put together, maybe not necessarily filled with North American players, but they are a North American organization, and they do play a lot of the time, at least in their online qualifiers and whatnot, from, of course, the EG house in North America. So they're classified as North American team, so they're honorary North Americans. But then on top of that, so I'm not only saying it because of that, but Team NP actually got third place in that event. They were knocked out by EG. Now, NP could have very possibly been in the grand finals themselves. They were up 1-0, and they lost an 80-minute match against EG in Game 2. A game that they were up for good portions of it. I was actually staying up to watch that game, and man, they, in a lot of ways, should have won that game. But Samael, actually, of Evil Geniuses, playing his signature Storm Spirit hero, He actually ended up getting an Ags eventually later on in the game, and he literally had black holes that were better than Enigma black holes. It was insane. He basically took over and eventually helped lead EG to victory, which ultimately helped them win Game 3 in the end, and of course, move on to the grand finals where they took out Newbie, as I mentioned. But NP is clearly a team to look out for moving forward. They looked really good at this event. So between them and EG winning the Manila Masters, I think North American Dota is definitely looking really strong right now. Arguably the strongest it's been in a long time. Because on top of that, you also have a lot of these up-and-coming teams. You have these teams that are kind of being put together now with the TI7 qualifiers coming up. And obviously, you got your teams like Complexity, which frankly, I'm not completely sold on their roster just yet, and we'll see over time how that continues to look. But you got other teams such as, of course, you have Digital Chaos, for example, but you also have Team Red was just recently announced here. Team Red, actually, you got players including Zizzy, Monkeys Forever, Newsham, Franz, and Jenkins. But then you have Team Freedom is another one of these really strong up-and-coming teams, actually. And they've been making a bit of a splash themselves. In fact, in the Galaxy Battles qualifiers that's currently going on, they could potentially qualify if things continue to go pretty well for them. So the point is, North American Dota 2, I think, is definitely in a pretty good spot right now. And looking forward to seeing how that continues to follow suit. So, and actually to top that all off, we do have the other big North American team, formerly known as Thunderbirds. That's right. They actually just were picked up by another gaming organization, Planet Odd Gaming. It's got a kind of a weird ring to it. I'm not sure what I think about it. I definitely like Digital Chaos better. I wasn't sold on I kind of was sold on Thunderbirds. I like the name Thunderbirds. I didn't think their logo was the best, but obviously it's understandable. They are joining an actual organization now with this Planet Odd Gaming. Frankly, I haven't personally heard of this organization before, so I know I'm like a lot of people out there that are kind of scratching my heads a little bit, but I guess they've been active in Hearthstone and Counter-Strike or CSGO even a little bit. So, but they were found very, very recently. In fact, what I'm reading on Liquipedia, they were actually just found last month. That's really interesting. Okay, well, who knows? You got to give them a chance, right? So we'll see how that works out for them. But again, in general, North American Dota definitely in a good situation. Something that's in a bad situation, unfortunately, it's Team Secret. They're labeled as my bad situation team. Now, I've made many points over these shows here that Team Secret's definitely a team I expect to do very well. And of course, you look at the KF Major, the group stages specifically, going undefeated, getting that top seed. They were the top dogs, and I think everything was kind of coming together. And then SG Esports happened. They get knocked out. Obviously, the talk starts. After that, Pylai Dai ends up leaving the team to join Team NP. They end up picking up Yapzor as a replacement. Yapzor is a great player. I've mentioned this again on a previous show. I think actually you could argue in some sense that he's probably going to fit better with the team. But with that in consideration, they also haven't had the best results since that's happened. Manila Masters specifically, they haven't had the most to play, to be fair. But Manila Masters, they ended up finishing last place, tied with Clutch Gamers, actually. They were knocked out initially by Newbie 2-1 in the quarterfinals, and then they lost to Team NP 2-1, and thus, they're out. Now, obviously, they lost to what ended up being the runner-up and the third-place team in the end, and they took them both to 3 games. So there is that argument that is that really that bad. But when you look at just from a results perspective, that on top of their Kiev Major blow-up, this is a team that needs to definitely kind of find their identity once again. They need to, calm things down and really figure out what they're like moving forward. And, well, they're going to get a chance with the Epicenter coming up. Of course, Epicenter, not really arguably, the biggest influential event coming up for the TI7 invites. They need to do well in this event. Hey, if they win it, then, as I've said before, whoever wins this event is going to get that TI7 spot, absolutely, as an invite, and that definitely could potentially still be a team like Team Secret, but we're going to definitely find out a lot more about Team Secret and the addition of Yapzor and what they're able to do with what's definitely a strong roster. You got Mid One on there, proven to be one of the best mid players in the world, even Puppy, a fantastic captain. Obviously, Keizu, an up-and-coming, is... I don't know if he can classify up-and-coming anymore, but he's a very, very strong offlaner. MP as their carry, which... I've felt this is maybe their weak point overall. That's another story for another time, but still a solid player in the end. And then, of course, the App Store, as I've said, I think fits pretty well with the team as that 4 position for the team. So, but yeah, Team Secret currently on the bad, and hey, who knows? Maybe after Epicenter, we'll be talking them about the good. We'll have to wait and see. And then there's the ugly. Visa issues, even. Visa issue. Why am I having trouble saying that? Visa issues that have been happening. Now, there was one a couple of weeks ago. Team Freedom, actually, the reason why they're not at the Zotac LAN currently going on is apparently Yorar, one of their players, ended up having some visa issues and was unable to attend, so they had to drop out somewhat last minute. Thus why Team NP initially replaced them. So, or excuse me, no, this is Digital Chaos replaced them. So DC ended up replacing Team Freedom, obviously at that event. But the visa issue itself, it's again, I'm not an expert in this field, but I know this is something that's been happening, since the beginning of esports, really, with all these international events. And this on top of, it was actually just announced earlier today, even as I was doing these recordings here. Clutch Gamers is not going to be attending the Summit 7. Clutch Gamers is one of these hot teams out of Southeast Asia. They just played in the Manila Masters, of course. They're going to be playing at Epicenter. They were set to play at the Summit 7, but unfortunately, they're having visa issues. And as of earlier today, they will not be attending the Summit 7 LAN. So really unfortunate stuff to hear, especially for teams like this. These are teams, in this case, both Freedom and Clutch Gamers, are these rising teams, these up-and-coming teams that we're really hoping to get the chance to see in that LAN environment more and more. To, if anything, give that experience and allow them to kind of build up said experience and said quality of play over time. But something as, I almost said as simple, not really, clearly not as simple, but something as silly almost as a visa issue is preventing them from attending these LANs. So again, I'm not an expert in this field. I don't know if this is something that Valve can necessarily step in and really try to make sure this isn't something that happens or continues to happen. Now, this isn't a Valve major. Obviously, they've had issues themselves even at their own major events. Obviously, with TI in the past, I think we have had situations where teams haven't been able to make it in the long run. I know the Boston major, we had, a couple of players at least were not able to make it. So it's just something that esports has to deal with, and I unfortunately don't know if that's something that's ever going to change, but it is ugly. It's a black eye for everyone. It's just something that nobody wants to see, and Team Freedom and Clutch Gamers are your most recent examples of the visa issues situation. So that's the good, the bad, and the ugly. We still got plenty more to talk about. Several things, both a couple of events that have both did just happen, one that's happening right now in the Zotac Cup, and even a little bit of patch 7.06c. But joining me to talk about plenty more is going to be the one, the only Tsunami. Tsunami, how's it going, man?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing pretty good here. I've been watching a fair amount of Dota. I actually casted a lot of Dota yesterday. It was kind of out of the blue. For these galaxy battles that are going on, one of these many lands that are happening, actually. So
yeah, this one definitely emerged out of nowhere, though. Very, very little notice, yeah. I felt like, and then all of a sudden, a lot of people started paying attention to it.
That's $150,000 land, so obviously that's going to be a little bit attractive. But yeah. It does have it is the land itself is during the same weekend as Summit, so that kind of sucks. But for the teams that aren't going to Summit, it's another opportunity, I guess, to play in this. So we'll see how that goes for them.
And I'm curious how Valve will, I guess, weight each of them, because I guess most people are considering Summit to be fairly weak roster-wise, because really the only guaranteed invite that's showing up is VP. And so I guess a lot of people are kind of writing off the value that Summit may provide in terms of determining TI invites. And then Galaxy Battles, I'm actually not too sure about which teams are competing. I know a few SEA teams and a few Chinese teams for sure.
Yeah, I got the roster right here. It's Newbie, IG Vitality, TNC, Planet Odd, which is former Thunderbirds. We'll talk about that later on. Yeah. They're weird. We got Happy Feet qualifying out of Southeast Asia, and then LGD out of China, and then we're going to have an American and a European team as well. So the lineup's actually not too bad. It's actually pretty strong, but yeah, it's kind of funny you bring that up because on my last week's show, I actually did do a kind of a ranking of tournaments that are happening and how they impact a TI spot. I think I had Epicenter at number 1, Manila, which is currently going on at number 2. And then I had Starlight, I want to say, and so Summit was my 4th one. I think I did have it above Galaxy Battles technically, but I don't know if you feel the same.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate. Mainly I'm just basing it off of the teams that are showing up. And so I guess it really comes down to how much clout an organizer has, because I'm sure if, Galaxy Battles was a more known organization, what is the organization that's running it anyway?
It's one of these Chinese organizations, man. What is it? National Electronic Sports Open.
Okay.
Exactly. It's AKA a organization that was made up last week. No, I don't know.
Yeah, I can't say I'm too familiar, but yeah, that pretty much determines on because we've come to the point that teams are especially pre-TI season where teams, you have to woo them to bring them to your tournament. I mean, it's not just prize pools anymore that'll be enough. You need to be like, this needs to be worth my time and proving myself to Valve and other, determining factors in this pre-TI amp up season.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. And, I'm going to be joined by Bill later on, actually, of the Beat organization. We're going to talk about third-party tournaments and kind of, maybe what can be done to help. Because like you said, it's crazy, and it is. You feel like it's almost like a problem to an extent. There's just so much going on. It seems all chaotic, and figuring out, what, maybe getting a little more organization across the board would be better for everyone. But hey, right now it's all over the place, but it is giving us a lot of Dota to watch, that's for sure.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
That's the positive as a spectator, I guess. But all right, so that's the Galaxy Battles. Anyways, we're going to do more to talk about a couple of bigger events, to say the least. We had Manila just wrap up, of course, last week, and we had our champion crowned, and EG ended up winning it all in the end. They actually beat Newbie 3-1. They won the first game. Newbie came back to tie it, and then EG just finished off strong, winning it 3-1. But this wasn't an easy road for EG by any means, and it was quite the tournament throughout. So I don't know how much of a chance you had to watch this event as a whole, but what did you think of the Manila Masters as a whole?
For the most part, I'd say that if I had to draw a bracket, if I had to do the predictions, I'd say most of it fell where I was expecting. The only real surprises, I guess, were Clutch Gamers losing to Faceless in the losers bracket first round, because I had been casting a handful of SEA games, and the whole gauntlet of Clutch Gamer qualifications where they were qualifying for LAN after LAN after LAN was I was seeing them, and I was like, this team seems like the kings of SEA, especially, I guess, after their last qualifying match, which was for MDL, I believe. I don't remember what team it was against, but that's I didn't remember because they were just running truck on every single other SEA team, including Faceless. In fact, Faceless was Clutch had their number, but one of the things that many people were skeptical about for Clutch moving forward was, okay, they're great online, but you put them in a LAN situation, and how do they handle it? And, they got one game off of IG in their first, I guess, the first elimination match, and so they got sent to losers there. And then, I don't know, maybe nerves, maybe Faceless decided to finally care, but whatever the case, Clutch Gamers lost. And aside from that, most of the other results were pretty expected for me. I guess OG losing is a little bit surprising to most people, but I can't say that I'm too surprised, whether or not Mad being there was a factor or not, which he wasn't, as he had announced prior. I don't know if that played an issue, as we all saw TrueSight, and we saw definitely TrueSight putting a big emphasis on the power of coaching, so maybe, but yeah, aside from that, I'd say the tournament fell where I was expecting.
Well, that's actually an interesting point with Matt not being there and OG specifically. Again, it is 7.06. This was one of the first events, obviously, you played on that patch, and you do have to think that maybe that had a little bit of an impact. But OG also does have a history of, doing very good at these majors, especially, and then maybe shortly after, they, not that they're taking it easy by any means, but I don't see this kind of like you as oh my God, OG lost. What's going on? I mean, I don't think anyone really should. In my mind, I've said this many times before, OG is still the number one team in Dota 2. And nothing that happens between now and TI will change my mind, frankly. So them losing to Faceless, however, was a little bit more surprising. Faceless, you mentioned not only defeating Clutch Gamers, which I kind of agree with you. Clutch Gamers, this team that's on this hot streak with all these online qualifiers. I will say, on the idea of Clutch Gamers, this was kind of an unfriendly format for them in the sense that this is a newer team to this LAN experience, playing with the big dogs now, getting thrown right into it with a double elimination right against IG off the bat. That's pretty tough, right? Where instead of it was like a group stage initially, it kind of let them maybe get into it a little bit easier of sorts or get more comfortable. But yeah, they were thrown right into the wolves, and they definitely felt that. But Faceless, to me, though, was kind of a team that had quite the run, but NP, actually, for me, overall, was the team that stood out the most. They ended up finishing third place, of course, but honestly, they were on the verge and probably should have been in the grand finals. I guess,
kind of retroactively, I leveled them up because I don't remember. I think it was the press conference that EG had held afterwards that I believe Crit, but someone on EG had mentioned like they think NP is very strong.
It was Zai.
Okay, Zai. Yeah, that's right. And so the evidence is that seeing as how EG does not play very many officials, they're getting invited to everything. They still need to practice Dota competitively, and one of the best options in North America currently is NP. And so if EG is giving NP that much credit, and even if they didn't give them any credit, even if they were like, whatever, NP, whatever, it was the losers finals, we're loser bracket kings anyway, no one's going to touch us, you still level up a lot playing against a consistently top 3 team like EG. And so after the tournament, I guess during the tournament, I was like, wow, NP's doing surprisingly well. But then afterwards, whenever, you can kind of put the pieces together that they scrim a lot, I was like, okay, I can see why NP is as strong as they are.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And when this team was first formed, when this new roster came about, I was actually, out of all the roster changes that happened, I think this probably was the best one overall, as far as this kind of newer team that was put together and kind of switching roles and everything. The most anticipated as far as having so much potential. So
so much potential and the semi-reunion factor of it, of being Cloud9.
That's true. Yeah, no, there was even a moment in the cast where LD actually called them Cloud9, and he was actually kind of trolling a bit, but then he actually slipped up and said it because he was trolling with it so much. He's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have been doing all that trolling, but that was pretty funny in itself. But yeah, they really should have won that game too. I actually stayed up to watch that one, but it's ended up being an 80-minute game.
Yeah.
That they ended up coming out on the short end. But Sumail on Storm Spirit, that's right. I remember Sumail on Storm Spirit just going off and eventually getting the victory for EG there. And ultimately taking the series after that. So, a team that we haven't really mentioned yet is Newbie, who, by the way, they got to the grand finals from the winner's side.
Oh, yeah, they did.
They had quite the run. Their only loss initially was to Team Secret in the first round, but they 2-0'd OG. They 2-0'd EG before that. So, but then they ran into EG in the grand finals. They obviously lost it 3-1. But I think Newbie also gained a bit of traction here once again, because this is a team that has been a little bit of a struggle as of late, especially with the Kiev major and their results there.
Yeah, and I could have sworn that multiple times various panelists or casters were like under the impression that Newbie had won DAC or something, because I swear there was at least like 2 different personalities who were saying like, yeah, I mean, like Newbie's coming hot off that DAC victory, and I'm like, I don't think that's right. And they had gotten third at DAC, which was still like, I guess pre-Kiev. I mean, there wasn't that much time. It was like 2 weeks between Kiev and DAC ending, but like I'd say definitely most people had originally considered it, like the original DAC in 2015, I believe, to be like the progenitor for the majors, being it's like it had a compendium in Dota 2 and there was like a big prize pool, all the big teams were there, and so DAC is taken very seriously, and so them getting third was definitely like a third or first. I know I got what the personalities were trying to get at, but yeah, after Kiev, I, much like many other people, were starting to write them off, and so it's more, I guess, within China that newbie gets the most experience, because Chinese teams are just constantly playing in all these random like leagues and qualifiers and tournaments and stuff like that, and like these random galaxy battles that come up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I had thought that maybe whenever it comes to international tournaments, then maybe they're slipping. But Manila has definitely re-inspired some confidence. I don't think that they're a guaranteed lock for TI. In fact, I don't think anyone is quite ready to put them in that position. But amongst the Chinese teams after IG, I think newbie is confidently in the top 3.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second, since you brought that up. So, as I mentioned earlier, I did my whole ranking tier list of the tournaments and where I think they place going towards a TI invite. There was only 2, however, that I felt like if you win it, you're getting an invite. One of them is Epicenter, which is still coming up. That's, I think, unarguably the best competition. There's 10 teams, $500,000 tournament. It's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had Manila Masters. I think Manila Masters, this was before it happened, talking about how the winner of this should get that TI invite spot. EG wins it. In my mind, they're guaranteed a spot now with OG. Personally, I feel like those 2 teams are the only 2 teams that actually have a guaranteed spot right now. So that should feel very, very comfortable about getting that invite. So you feel the same or different?
Most people, I'm considering that VP and IG can get added to that list, mainly because I guess there's no way that Valve is going to invite fewer than 4 teams. I find that very unlikely. And so, based off of 2017's set of results thus far, IG and VP have definitely solidified themselves during these first 6 months or so. The last 2 months could be an X factor, but I have historically felt that Valve puts an emphasis over like an entire season's worth of performances, and the major system was kind of implemented to break up the season so that you can kind of get more stratifications, being like, okay, well, now we can kind of rule out everything that was pre 7.05 or whatever, and we can start looking forward at newer results. But patches are coming really quickly, and so I think that you have to consider like a longer time frame of results. So I think that right now, unless a VP just get like massacred at their upcoming tournaments, which I believe it's mainly just Epicenter that they're going to. I don't know if they're going to MDL or not, but yeah, and I don't.
They
even
are going
know
to Summit as well. So
yeah, but I mean, honestly, even if they lose Summit, like I don't think that impacts them too much. It would be surprising, but I don't think it would impact them too much. So yeah, and plus it's kind of cute that if you do EG, OG, VP, IG, then you kind of have a little flavor from every region aside from SEA and South America. So I'm considering those to be my 4 lock, and that's a pretty popular opinion.
Yeah, it is. OG and EG again being my 2. I do understand the argument for VP. Now, again, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that they're only going to invite 2 teams right now. Like that.
Right.
I just feel like as of right now, those 2 teams should feel the most comfortable. As like we don't need to do anything else. We got that invite. Virtus Pro, I know there's the argument they were runner-up at Kiev, and obviously we had the Boston Major situation with then Adafinem, now Mouse Sports, that they got the invite to Kiev because of that. I was always against that idea. I stressed that from the very beginning, and my biggest reason was because from Boston to Kiev, it was a completely different game in a lot of ways because 7.0 came out. This was one of the biggest patches we've ever seen in Dota 2. So this idea that you're taking results from pre 7.0 to determine whether or not a team gets an invite, it just seems silly to me. I kind of feel like the same thing is happening here with 7.06. Now, obviously, it wasn't nearly as dramatic. It wasn't as big. But I do think that it has to have some kind of impact, meaning that VP at least has to prove themselves to an extent. They don't need to win Epicenter by any means, but I feel like they should at least get, a top 4 performance to maybe then be like, okay, there should be a pretty good chance that they go now. But again, outside of VG and OG, I feel like that those are the only 2 teams that absolutely deserve. Whether or not that's the same thing Valve agrees with, obviously, is a completely different story, really. But it'll be interesting to see how many teams they do invite this year, because it was 6 last year, right?
Yeah,
I want to say, and there is talk that it could possibly even be 4 this year, and then that because now with South America qualifiers coming into play, and if they still want to do the wild cards, which I assume they do, so I don't know. I really don't know what to think on that, and we'll definitely later shows down the road go over that too. But it's going to be interesting to see what they decide to do.
Yeah, I'm definitely. Well, so then actually, don't they? Like the timeline, the deadline to start talking about that stuff is approaching soon, because TI qualifiers are coming in, at least opens at the end of this month.
Well, everyone's speculating that it's basically the Summit and now the Galaxy Battles. Those are since they're happening the final week of that weekend, that's going to be it. So right after that is done, which I think they're both done on the 18th, I want to say, which is a Sunday. And then the qualifiers start, the open qualifiers start that next week, I believe. They start the 26th, I want to say, perhaps, but let me see if I can actually find that here.
Yeah, so I guess like the last
22nd,
remaining...
okay.
Oh, okay. Oh, so, wow, so that's like right in the beginning of open qualifiers, I believe.
Yeah, so pretty much, the Summit, I believe the idea is that the Summit and Galaxy Battle is going to happen, and then literally the next day, we should know the TI invites, is the plan, so.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see.
Then Epicenter is going to be very important this next week or so.
Yeah, Epicenter's the big one. Obviously, we have Zotac currently going on, which I don't necessarily value that high, obviously, but
nah, I don't
really not
think
much at all. Yeah.
At the most, Zotac gives Fnatic a better shot at being, I guess, like a direct qualifier invite, but no one who wins this is getting a direct invite, I'm pretty sure. Unless if Newbie are like slipped in with like 6 direct invites to TI, I don't think anyone at Zotac is going to be making waves at TI.
Yeah. Yeah, this is going to be a very curious invite list, as it usually is, I'm sure. But the first one that I personally, at least, am going to be heavily involved in. So I'm looking forward to experiencing it. But yeah, EG and OG for me right now, the only 2 teams there. But yeah, Epicenter, no doubt, going to be huge. Another event, though, as I said, going on, maybe not as much influence, but the Zotac Cup is currently happening. And we're talking about Newbie, how they, coming off that runner-up at Manila. They're currently in a decent spot here in the Zotac Cup. As of this recording, they're in the semifinals. They're going to be matched up against Fnatic, actually. And after they Newbie went 2-0 in the group stages right there. But first, I want to start with this, how the format of this event, not the biggest fan of.
It's peculiar.
Yeah, they chose to go best of 1 GSL format with only the loser bracket match being best of 3. So literally, teams like Newbie, they played 2 games and they're already in the semifinals because they beat 2 teams in the GSL format. Just 2 games, 1-0, 1-0. So I feel like best of 1 should not be a thing, and frankly, in LANs in general, at least in this kind of format.
Well, for group stages, definitely. I suppose, well, actually, maybe not for group stages. See, this is the problem that like Swiss has kind of infected me, that all group stages I'm like reconsidering altogether, because I didn't have any issues with Swiss leading into single elimination for Kiev. I thought that it was reasonable. It didn't really impact the hype. No shocking results aside from SG beating Secret really emerged. So I thought it was okay to do single elimination on a LAN as long as you have like a reasonable group stage. And then some people are like, yeah, well, then group stage is irrelevant, right? Because, then doesn't matter how good you did in the group stage, you can still get knocked out in 1 loss. But, if you're the top seed and you're going against the bottom seed, then you should win, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that is a kind of a good point that's brought up how, obviously the mind has changed now as far as, with that Swiss format being brought in. But I mean, I personally love GSL format. I actually think GSL format is one of the better ways to determine, especially for an event like this, where I don't know if I necessarily want to see a GSL format for the major or for TI, because we did have that problem with the Boston major where the seedings kind of felt like they were just randomly put in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But in an event like this, though, the Zotac Cup, I think it's fine. It's not as influential. It's not as big of a deal. And only being 8 teams,
Exactly.
you can't really screw up the groups that much. And I don't think they necessarily did here by any means. So, but yeah, being best of one is what really kind of get the fact that, like I said, Newbie only literally won 2 games and they're going to the semifinals already just feels a little off. But it's what it is. That's what happened. The results for it: Warriors Gaming Unity got knocked out of Group A, and then Team Singularity. It's like, who got knocked out of Group B?
Actually, I had briefly seen some Singularity, but I don't think it was with the roster that they have right now. And so, yeah, I'd seen, okay, so they had won Pro Dota Cup. In fact, we may have casted them at some point.
Oh, we have,
because,
yeah. No. Well, I think we might have casted them for the Zotac qualifiers, to be honest. And I don't know if you were casting with me with that. But.
Actually, yeah, you may be right. I remember Vega beating them, and so that was the Epicenter qualifier. And then I remember Pro Dota playing against them. So we may have done both, I feel. Did we do Epicenter? I don't remember now.
I did not do Epicenter, I don't believe.
Okay.
Maybe I did. I don't know.
Whatever the case, I remember hearing the organization name, and from what little I saw their matches, they weren't too bad. The 2 teams that they lost to were NP, and then they lost in the tiebreaker against Danish Bears, I guess it's a tiebreaker. They played a BO3 against Danish Bears, and Singularity took 1 game off of them. But yeah, the invite list of this tournament was peculiar, but yeah, Singularity, I can't say many people had them as favorites, and same thing for Warriors Gaming.
Yeah, it's not surprised to see them knocked out. And then we had some further results of the quarterfinals, actually. IG Vitality knocking out Danish Bears 2-0. Again, not a big surprise there. But Fnatic beating Digital Chaos 2-1. Not that I'm surprised by that necessarily, but that was an interesting result. I think it's worth mentioning. So DC knocked out. But Fnatic, of course, this is that newer roster. I mean, you look at the lineup. Ajit is their 1 position. You got QO, Ohio, DJ, and Febby. So this is a mixture of several different teams of the Southeast Asian region that have been kind of brought together. And I do think Fnatic is going to be a team that continues to move up these ranks as well, specifically within the Southeast Asian region, which you could almost argue right now is what the most chaotic region as far as just who's on top.
Yeah,
of it.
It's very it's not even like rock paper scissors, because it's one of those modified rock paper scissors where you have gun and flamethrower and stuff like that, because there are so many teams that just always seem to consistently dominate some other teams, and then they'll just look like fools against these no names, and then at other opportunities you have pretty consistent results where these 2 top tier teams are kind of taking games off of each other. And so it's a very volatile region, and I don't envy whoever at Valve, if they decide to give Southeast Asia an invite, it's going to be hotly contested, and there isn't much time for new data to come out. I mean, honestly, Zotac might be an opportunity for Fnatic to really move up the tier list. I don't think that they're going to beat Newbie, which is going to happen later today, but I was, like you, I guess, not too surprised that they beat DC, seeing as how DC has definitely had a lot more matches recently. I guess Fnatic may have had an edge there somewhat, but yeah, it's very difficult to gauge the power of Southeast Asia.
Well, also on that note of the series there, I was watching the end of it. Fnatic actually, they ran a mid Phantom Lancer to counter the mid Invoker of Abed, and it wrecked him. I was actually super disappointed to see that happen, because I hate seeing Phantom Lancer win. I mean, I love Phantom Lancer personally. I think he's a terrible hero right now, and every single time he wins, all the defenders come out and see, look, you guys are just playing him wrong. And I'm like, it's not. You could have picked any carry in that situation. It would have probably worked the same. Yeah. I don't know about that. I mean,
I still hold by my one truism that I say Juggernaut is superior to PL in every situation possible.
Oh, yeah. No, you've talked about that before plenty.
Yeah.
Well, it worked out for them there. Yeah, QO went 11-0-9 in that game 3. They wrecked. They won 23-3 hero kills. And we almost got the 3-2-2, but unfortunately, they got one more kill. And thus, They're moving on to face Newbie, as you said. Now let me put up a scenario here, because I know we're sitting here suggesting that Zotac Cup isn't an event that really should influence the TI invite, but say we have Newbie versus NP in the grand finals, and Newbie goes 3-0 over NP, for example. Are you then thinking that, like, because me, that might mean something. That might mean, okay, they just came runner-up at Manila's against EG, and now they just beat NP in a grand finals best of 5, doing it like in 3-0 fashion. I think you could argue that's almost enough to get that invite spot.
The problem is that Newbie's not at Epicenter. If they were coming off of this and then they went to Epicenter, then I would definitely put more stock in this result, because not only does it provide the team momentum, but it shows consistency in performance. You win Manila, you win this random LAN, and then you show up at least to Epicenter to at least prove your worth and maybe show that it wasn't a fluke or anything. But the fact that they're not at Epicenter, I feel like it kind of washes over whatever result comes here. You may, like, even if China gets 2 invites, then still it's kind of difficult to guarantee that Newbie and IG are the locks, because, again, like LFY is going to be at Epicenter, and then I haven't really seen too much of them, but they might, make some waves. So it's unlikely to me that Zotac is going to wield too much influence.
Yeah. That's fair. And I guess you can make the argument, you can't just look at it just a one specific match. You really do got to look at the event as a whole. How they got there, that definitely matters too. Is
right.
How much of a grind really was it? So yeah, in this case, Newbie winning 2 games initially, and albeit they're impressive.
To the semifinal.
Yeah, straight to the semifinal. I mean, they beat DC and IGV in those. Those some formidable opponents. And
true.
Now Fnatic, as we're talking about, a definitely rising team in Southeast Asia once again. But yeah, I don't know. It's going to be tough. I guess maybe I'll play the reaction game after the grand finals does happen, and we'll see from there. But that is a good point about them not being at Epicenter. So, what I meant to do actually after the Manila, when we wrapped up with Manila there a little too quickly, because what I like to do with events like that is kind of go over some hero stats that maybe stand out from the event, and especially this one being one of the first 7.06
right? Okay.
Tournaments right here. So one that I didn't even have to look at the stats to know this, but Bristleback was made quite the appearance here at the Manila Masters. He ended up going 7-3 overall. He's picked 10 times, but 7-3 record. He was tied for the most picked hero actually with Clockwork, who both had 10 appearances in this event. But Bristleback, this hero's kind of just exploded, and we're definitely seeing that impact as a result.
Yeah, and a lot of people were, I guess, surprised at the fact that 7.06C didn't directly nerf the hero, and then people were like, well, I guess the auxiliary nerfs were that Solar Crest got nerfed somewhat, the evasion got taken down, and the offensive capabilities are a little bit less broken now. But I think that the hero is fine, so I'm not too surprised. The main thing that makes him so good is the fact that he's become like one of these combo carries, in that, yeah, he's a good hero by himself, but he's really comes to shine whenever he has a good partner. And so most often we were seeing Io Bristleback be the go-to combination. Later in the event, it started getting banned out, and then Crystal Maiden started making a rise as a partner because the Arcane Aura is just way too good. So I think the hero is fine because you kind of need that draft synergy to make it work. And so I wasn't too surprised that he didn't get touched in 7.06. At most, 7.06C. At most, I would have thought maybe a talent nerf or something, but I'm fine with him being the way that he is. And, even in Zotac, right now, where is he? Because, okay, he's been picked twice and he's lost both games. So, yeah, exactly. And so the first game, it was DC picking it against Newbie, and the second time, it was Danish Bears picking it against Fnatic. And in the DC game, he had Io, and in the Danish Bear game, he actually did not have any partners. And so, yeah, I'm not too surprised that the hero, he did well. And I was satisfied to see that one position Bristleback was becoming a thing, because pretty much as far as his competitive life has been concerned, he's been known as more of a offlaner. But, I'm looking forward to seeing what teams will be doing with Bristleback moving forward.
As a spectator, I do find it entertaining, almost that the hero, how he works, with the constant quill spam, you just see life around him just like dropping as a result. But I do know that as a player playing against a bristleback, that he's probably one of the most annoying heroes to play against. And I happened to cast several games yesterday, like I said, for the whole Galaxy Battles tournament, and it also just got me even a better look in terms of how the hero is just so ridiculous in the early laning phase. Especially, he happened to be compared with a Coddle in this case. Now you do bring up a good point that yes, he has to have that partner to really help him shine in the end. So I think he's overall maybe fine, but with the Chakra, with the double quill, man, I mean, it is just intense what that hero can do in the lane. And I feel like people are underestimating it still. Like he's still new enough that people just don't realize, what the potential is. But yeah,
that and the fact that counterplay seems to be like, it may be a low level interpretation, but I'm seeing so few silver edges against him. Sure. And as a one position bristleback, obviously he gets farm a lot faster than an offlane bristleback, which when he was offlane, the silver edge was like a common, fourth item for cores on the enemy team, because they were like, okay, well, now it's been like 40 minutes into the game, bristleback's starting to become an issue. I'll start equipping myself for him. But for this like one position stuff, very few people want to rush silver edge, which I can understand, but there's a time and a place for that kind of item. And same thing with hero picks also. Like, there aren't very many break mechanics. It's pretty much just the Shadow Demon, Aghanims, and Doom. But, Legion Commander was making more and more of an appearance, being that you can duel and you can force Bristleback to look at you. For some reason, Axe wasn't seeing too much play, but, same kind of concept. So I think teams still need to explore dealing with him in unconventional ways. He's not your typical carry. You have to play around him completely differently, much as how the team picking him has to synergize with him completely differently.
Now, another hero that I'm kind of curious to think about why, but not what I would expect to see on this list, but that's kind of standing out to me with the stat is Batrider between Zotac and the Manila event. He actually has a 4-10 record between those two events, and he's actually one of the most picked when you combine the two events as well. Obviously 14 times there. So that seems, obviously that's not good. And but I mean, why Batrider being so poor?
I feel like these days Batrider gets picked a little bit too early in drafts, and then later on teams, like both teams, are pretty well equipped. Like so many times, like the main thing is that, okay, you pick Batrider, one of the instant picks or bans is that you need to get rid of Nyx Assassin. And so that's become an issue. And then Legion Commander is a very popular hero. And so, you put her on the table and all of a sudden your lasso is useless. And that becomes an issue. And Abaddon has kind of fallen off suspiciously because I don't really think Abaddon got touched that heavily recently, but he's completely fallen off the face of the earth. But, he's an issue. And then you got banishes. And there's so many ways to deal with a Batrider that if you pick him early in the draft, you need to know what you're getting yourselves into. And for some reason, many teams are just like, it's a Batrider, what could go wrong? And in the laning phase, nothing will go wrong. But late game, you're like, wait a second, this hero is not doing initiating things. He's just kind of forcing us into bad fights.
And one thing I'm actually noticing too is this is kind of a funny one where this has more so to do with the Zotac Cup, but Crystal Maiden is actually only picked twice, and she's 2-0 in those games, but she is all the way down on the list as far as being played. She's played a little bit more at Manila, but yeah, Zotac itself only being played twice. We have heroes that have been played 7, 6, 5 times, a lot of them. So I guess that -5 movement speed nerf actually really did her in.
I mean, to be fair, if you look at pick and ban stats, she's currently second place for picks and bans.
Okay.
Right behind Bristleback. Yeah, so she's getting banned a lot. And a lot of people were pissed at the nerf. They were like, dude, she's already so slow. Why are you making her even slower? And then the common reply, which is, I struggle with balances around heroes' strengths and makes their weaknesses more weak. And so that's always the justification. And so Crystal Maiden definitely needed a nerf, and I'm actually surprised that it was such a gentle nerf. She had gotten nerfed previously with her Freezing Field mana cost, I believe, or no, cooldown, I think, was increased. in, I think, either 7.05 or 7.06, because in Kiev, she was the number one picked hero, and she had like a 60 or something percent win rate. So she is consistently, like, she's sleeper OP, because you pick a Crystal Maiden, and no one in the back of their mind, like, none of the spectators, none of the players, none of the teams are like, oh god, it's Crystal Maiden. But she wins games, and so, yeah, I don't think the nerf was too dramatic, seeing as how she's still pretty much topping the charts as far as picks and bans are concerned.
Yeah, it's going to be curious to see how they address that, if Valve feels like it's necessary to address it. I mean, you could argue it's obviously, she's just kind of just a solid support option, and you really don't want to change her too much. Her skill set is one of the most iconic in the game. It's been around forever, and I guess maybe toning down Freezing Field a little bit is the one direction I think you could argue is deserving, but outside of that, I think the hero is probably going to be untouched for the most part. Or at least I kind of hope so, because I like playing Crystal Maiden too, so she is pretty simple. Yeah, wins you games, which is a nice kind of combination there.
Yeah, whenever I started playing the two heroes, well, actually, back when I first started playing, Arcane Aura wasn't nearly as good as it is now on the hero herself, but it was always Lion and CM, because I did not know how mana management worked, and so I would be playing like mana intense heroes, and I'd be like, why can't I use my spells anymore? And I would just walk back to base every time. I'm like, I'm just gonna pick a hero that doesn't need to worry about that stuff.
Yeah. All right, so yeah, those are all the ones that kind of stand out here. Again, it's not the biggest sample size with events like this, as obviously only so many matches to be had, but kind of interesting. I think the biggest one though is we're definitely seeing the impact is that Bristleback. Bristleback has really stepped up since 7.06 here, so expect to see him definitely continuing more moving forward with such partners as the Wisp. And hey, I don't mind seeing the Wisp. I will say that, especially with the new Arcana there. Love true. That skin. It's awesome.
All these players thought that they were farming up their audio lines when in reality they were quietly getting a Arcana for IO.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we touched a little bit on 7.06C though, so I figure we'd also kind of just break down that patch just not too long here, but going over some of the bigger changes, because again, this wasn't a complete overhaul by any means, but it was one of these balance patches that tweak some stuff and fine tune some stuff, you could say.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people thought that Alphabet patches were done because there was 7.0 and then it was just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and then 6, and then there were like so many times I myself was like, why is 7.02 not 7.01B, or why is 7.03 not 7.0 whatever C? And so, like, I was also, I don't want letter patches to go away, because they have a place in, helping at least me keep track of things. And so C was a lot of hero changes as opposed to talent changes. It also did have the big, no more respawn time talent things, but for everything from 7.0 to 7.05, those just tweaking talents. iStrog had implemented this fresh mechanic into the game, which honestly, like, looking back, 7.0 was surprisingly well balanced for how dramatic everything was. And
oh yeah,
1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, the fact that I consider them to be minor changes is, a testament to how strong the original patch was, that, even if you mess around with a few talents, it's not too significant. But now we're back to hero changes, changing stats, turn rates, cast what animations, all that business. And so B and C patches are back.
Well, speaking of that, some of the more standout ones that may have impact on the competitive scene. Something we've seen a little bit already, the Solar Crest, the evasion reduced from 25 to 20%, the accuracy, which is now the True Strike mechanic, they renamed it to accuracy. Accuracy increased from 25 to 35%, so it's kind of a nerf/buff situation, but I think overall you can consider that a nerf. Obviously the evasion was a nice tool of the item. We have been seeing Solar Crest maybe die down a little bit since definitely Kiev, but I don't think this is a killer change by any means. Is you still expect to see a Solar Crest every game, perhaps?
Yeah, especially for defensive purposes. The main thing that surprised me was the fact that heroes that kind of rely on evasion, namely PA, there was no compensation. There was a brand new mechanic added where it was just like, you know what? Have free True Strike. Don't worry about building any Bloodthorn or Monkey King bar. We'll give you True Strike. And this is actually how Rod of Atos used to work for a very brief period of time, but no one cared. And so it's kind of been somewhat re-implemented, and like it was actually amusing to me that now they decided to rename the mechanic, because whenever Rod of Atos had it, no one had any questions, because everyone was like, I'm never going to build that item. I don't need to figure out how 50% True Strike works. And so they just ignored it, and they brought it back for Solar Crest, and everyone's like, wait, what? This is an item I use every time. You need to explain to me how this works. And so you're going to still see it consistently, but I was surprised that Evasion Heroes didn't get compensated.
And now with Heaven's Halberd also
Yeah.
that much more popular, the evasion aspect of it. Yeah, evasion's definitely it's kind of, turning your going to different places to an extent as well. There's a possibility being there.
Mm-hmm.
Bloodseeker, base damage increased by 4. That's a fun one there. And this was one of the, I didn't think much of it, but I heard people were talking that this could potentially bring some jungle Bloodseeker to the table, or even some mid Bloodseeker. Is that overselling it, you think?
I saw, I believe, Fnatic run mid Bloodseeker. I think it was at Zotac. It may have been during the group stages. And it worked, and it was pretty comedic. It was like a total train wreck, or it was a train wreck for the enemy team. The team that had Bloodseeker was doing great, and he built like Radiance into Dagon, and he was having a grand old time. I don't think the hero is kind of difficult to play in a core role, because the way that Blood Rage works, it's almost like the way that Slardar's sprint works, in that, you don't want Slardar to be a one position, because, he needs to sprint, he needs that movement speed to be relevant in a fight, but it's also making him take increased damage. Same thing with Bloodseeker. The brief period of time that he was seen in competitive, I think it was one of the TIs that Bloodseeker, or maybe it was before a TI, but there was some very, very brief period of time where I think EG was actually running like Bloodseeker Lina relatively frequently, and they were just putting Blood Rage on Lina, and she would insta-give someone with Laguna Blade and like a billion extra damage. And so the hero definitely needs to have a very, very strong team surrounding it. You can't just pick it and forget it. And if you can manage to pull off a jungle that does not gank at all, really, then go for it. But these days, junglers are all very roam oriented, and you kind of just pop into the jungle just to, get some quick experience in gold and just find bounty runes across the place. But you need to be a good roamer at the same time, and Bloodseeker is not a very good roamer.
Yeah, I'm looking at that game, actually. QO played it for Fnatic, you're right. 21-7-10.
Yeah.
As that middle Bloodseeker there. He actually even won a Battle Fury at 46 minutes into the game. Okay.
It was the enemy's fountain that he purchased it. By that time, they had Mega Creeps, and it was just Clown Town.
Yeah. That was just over at that point, it looks like. Okay. Well, yeah, that's... Bloodseeker's definitely a fun potential hero, so it would be nice to maybe see him kind of pop up here and there, but... Yeah, it's probably not something that we're gonna. It does feel like one of those. Hey, Bloodseeker's here, guys. Just remember, kind of like the Crystal Maiden nerf. It's like,
guys, come on. You don't need to pick her that much, right?
See, we're nerfing her. We're totally nerfing her, guys. we promise. She only runs at 275 move speed now rather than 280. So it's like just so they can say that they've nerfed her.
That was actually in one of the earlier 7-point-something patches. Like it was. Terrorblade only received one marginal nerf, but illusions in general received like a more significant nerf to, I think they started dealing even less damage to towers. And so specifically, like the changelog mentioned, it was like it had Terrorblade's one nerf, and then underneath it was like Terrorblade is also affected by the illusion nerf to building damage. And it was like, they knew that people were just going to run through this changelog, control F Terrorblade, and be like, oh my god, I can't believe you didn't get nerfed more. And then Valve was like, calm down. We nerfed an entire mechanic. And none of the other illusion heroes had that mentioned. Like, Naga did not have that bullet point mentioned. It was just Terrorblade.
That's hilarious. Yeah, they definitely have their, they really want to make it clear. It's like, okay, we are listening, guys. We know you're upset. Wisp is another one that it's kind of interesting, because I've heard this both ways, where it's like, this is technically a nerf, but you could almost see it as a little bit of a buff, because the idea that he's hurting himself more means that he can heal more effectively. So
yeah, I mean, if the spell cost like the main advantage is just like in the early game, because a lot of times like IO needs tank damage, and then you start munching on a Tango. And, sometimes if you're overcharging, a Tangle will sometimes heal too quickly and you won't be like maximizing your healing potential. But, I mean, you can just tank more damage. The main thing is that late game situations, like it's scaling. It's not flat. It went from 4.5% to 6%. So it's going to eat, no matter how much more mana you have, a more significant portion. So I think it's a smart nerf because, the hero is still good. Doesn't change how you fundamentally play it, but it's more vulnerable now.
Well, it's obviously with all the bristleback action, definitely Wisp is a hero that we are seeing a fair amount of once again, and ban against certain teams like NP that comes to mind because Pylai known for his Wisp play. So,
indeed,
I'm sure we'll still see plenty of that from him. Lone Druid, we've also been seeing appearances, and again, back to this whole Lone Druid bear build. We've constantly over these patches, it's just more and more like, all right, we made a mistake. We did not mean to make Sniper 2.0. We still want you to use the bear. Here's yet another change to give you a reason to use the bear here with the attack time improved.
Yeah, and one that has actually made Aghanim Scepter become almost a core build because EG ran it, and then I don't know if it was Zotac or like some there's some other qualifier going on right now, or there's some other
Galaxy battles going on.
I don't remember what it was specifically, but all I know is that Lone Druid Aghanim Scepter was run. It had an Invoker behind it, and so BAT buffs synergize very well with something like Alacrity because it gives you more damage, it gives you more attack speed, and BAT takes full advantage of both of those factors. And so, yeah, it was I didn't watch it. I just saw people crying about it on the Reddit and Twitter. And so, yeah, it's definitely, I don't think it's really viable to build primary Druid anymore, especially after his level 15 talent just completely eliminated any Druid-specific advantages. You can just choose between Bear Magic Resist or Bear Armor. And so, yeah, it's back to good old-fashioned Lone Druid, but at least Aghanim Scepter has gone from an original clown build to very viable.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Definitely, that could be interesting to see as far as moving forward there with the Lone Druid. But yeah, just glad that we're not seeing that Sniper 2.0 anymore. It's back to the bear idea, and if you're going to pick up the hero, you pretty much expect that now instead. Yeah. So, yeah, there's several other changes here. I don't know how, again, not to go over every single one, but I don't know, are there other ones that maybe stood out to you that you think is worth pointing out? Could have competitive impact?
I guess specifically not necessarily the C patch, but Klink's got buffed back-to-back patches. In 7.06 itself, he got buffed, and it was, nothing too significant. It was just Death Pact had kind of pretty much everyone is like, this is a much better Death Pact, but it has a higher cooldown now. It's 85 flat, whereas it used to be 45, 30, 15. But it has basically like double the uptime, where it used to be 35 seconds, now it's 65 seconds. And that was in 7.06. And now in C, specifically, buffed his Skeleton Walk movement speed just marginally, but also buffed Death Pact. And so you get more health and you get more damage. And again, you get that for 65-second uptime. And so
yeah.
I think that this is Ice Frog's next project. Oftentimes, whenever heroes get consistently buffed, he's like, you guys got to pick them. And for a little bit of time, it was Broodmother, but that did not take off. In 7.06 specifically, it was Broodmother, but it was like, I'll put that one back on the back burner. But yeah, Klink's getting buffed, and then the other one that was impressive to me was Monkey King getting buffed, because pretty much, like, if you told someone in 7.0 that, like, 5 patches later, he's going to get buffs, everyone's like, what are you talking about? But yeah, the hero got pretty dramatically nerfed in 7.06, and so I guess some charity was needed to make, I guess, specifically everyone was like, oh man, Baboka's probably creaming himself over these buffs, because yeah, he definitely a Monkey King enthusiast, and I don't really know how much IG picked him at Manila, but the hero was definitely nerfed substantially, the Basher nerf being the most significant one. So instead, in 7.06c, his laning presence has kind of been buffed, so I was surprised to see it, but, it doesn't seem to be broken, so I'm glad that it's happening.
Yeah, and I mean, no doubt 7.06 really hurt the hero. I mean, there haven't been many instances where a hero has gone from, first pick, top band priority to just never even seen in events since
at least not for a post TI patch, because like usually after post TI some reigning hero will just completely get obliterated. Like at one point it was Leshrac, Stormsphere once received that treatment, Morphling received that treatment way back when, and so usually it's after some major event that they're like, all right, this hero has had its moment in the sun, now you will be relegated back to the dumpster and spend like a year thinking about what you've done.
Yeah, Monkey King has not been touched in Zotac or Manila Masters.
Wow.
That's just an example right there.
Well, Manila Masters doesn't surprise me, but Zotac is a little bit surprising.
Yeah, no, it's even after these changes here kicking in. So, yeah, you're right. But to be fair, again, this did just happen. It could be one of those. We're not going to, it's not worth our time trying it.
Epicenter will be the proving ground to see like where Monkey King stands for me.
Yeah. All right, and again, there's several other changes here, but like I said, it's maybe some bigger ones. I guess Warlock, the Chaotic Offering, mana cost increase at later levels is a little bit something, but
he's still a good hero, especially after that talent change where he dies and turns into a golem. So the hero is still net buffed for 7.06 by a long shot.
Yeah, I still can't believe that actually summons the golem. Like
I can't believe it actually stuns. Yeah, exactly. Like whenever I was testing it, I was like, oh, okay, he summons the golem, but it doesn't do actually a chaotic offering. But then I was like, either this is lazy coding by Valve or they legitimately want this to be the case. But yeah, it's a full-on chaotic offering wherever he dies, and it's not really like it's not an easy talent to get to, but it's still it's not a level 25, it's a level 20, so.
I was going to say, what about the idea of running like a mid-warlock then? But if you're doing that, then you usually don't want to, die in the middle of a fight.
Yeah, and he's a common Midas builder, so it's not really too unprecedented for him to, you need a rush level 20 or something like that.
Yeah. All right, well, I think that covers 7.06C then, and I also think that wraps up all we wanted to talk about here. With having you on, Tsunami. So, obviously, as always, I appreciate it, and thank you for sitting down and taking the time to talk with me about both a couple of these events here and the latest patch. So, there's a lot of good Dota, man, to continue to watch here. You're going to be watching some more Zotac here?
I want to... I may look at the recaps for the finals. Maybe just if I see something unprecedented, then I'll peek in.
Staying up to the early morning?
I think after Manila, I've had enough staying up for an immediate time, and then I guess Epicenter will also be kind of unfortunate times for North Americans. So yeah, I need to pace myself with these kinds of things, especially as we approach this pre-TI season. I need to, make sure that I'm paying attention to everything, of course, as far as the results are concerned. But as far as watching the matches, I think I'm going to save it for the tier 1 teams.
Epicenter, I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because real quickly, if you don't mind, let's actually just preview the groups real quickly here, because that does start, it starts this Sunday. Yeah, geez, that really is coming up.
Yep.
It starts the 4th. I honestly didn't realize it was that close, but it sure is. We got Group A is OG, Liquid, Secret, Na'Vi, and LFY. And then Group B is Virtus Pro, Evil Geniuses, Invictus Gaming, Planet Odd, which is the former Thunderbirds team, and then Clutch Gamers. So off the bat, I mean, I see these groups. I don't know. That's tough. Like I want to lean towards Group B definitely being the tougher group, but Na'Vi, they've really been looking so good lately. I'm glad I think they definitely deserve this this vote, whatever that they got.
I mean, I'm also happy that they got it, but deserving is a bit of a leap.
Well, on that topic then, with Na'Vi, when I heard that, my reaction with this is their tournament, guys. Like they're putting a lot of money, they're putting a lot of time, a lot of effort into throwing on their tournament. This isn't an official Valve event where they're trying to really determine the absolute best team in the world. That's what the international's for. That's what the majors are for. They're here to put on a show, and this is a marketing tool for them, whatever. They happen to be using Dota 2 competitive scene as a tool for that. And if they want to invite a team that happens to be the most popular team in their region and kind of a home crowd team that has also been doing decent lately, I am more than fine with that.
Right. But I guess the main thing is that people were like, look, if you want to invite them, then just invite them. Don't go through this whole like song and dance of like giving teams like Faceless a shot or something like that, and you just turn it into a popularity contest at the end of the day because, obviously Navi is going to win every single popularity contest. And I mean, even previous years, I think like whenever Summit used to have redemption votes, I don't actually know if Navi was in a contention for those kinds of things, but they're, like you said, they're the most popular team by a long shot in their region, despite previous results. So that was the main thing about deserving or not. I think that it's great that they get to show up and they get to prove their worth against tier 1 teams, because all the other events that they're showing up to, you don't really get to compete against teams of this caliber. And so if there was ever a time to prove your TI capabilities, it's now.
Absolutely, and obviously we keep going back to Epicenter is going to be the one that determines that. So going back to the groups right here, it's 5 teams in each group. I'm also double checking, it is a round robin format, and I believe that means it's best of 3 for each of the matches, or are they doing best of 2? It doesn't actually say here.
It's best of 3.
Is it best of 3? Okay.
Yeah, on Wikipedia they have 3 placeholder matches for every match.
Okay, yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I was looking at the wrong tab. There you go. All right, so yeah, it is going to be best of 3. So yeah, there's a lot of matches to be played. I think this is definitely a good format. And the top 3 teams move on. The top team gets that bye, goes to the semifinals. The next 2 get to go to that quarterfinal spot. It is single elimination then from there on out. So, but yeah, going back to the groups themselves, is there one you lean towards?
I think Group B is stronger, mainly just because everyone at Group B was at Kiev, well, except for Clutch Gamers, but they were at Manila. Whereas Navi and LFY, which are in Group A, have not really been up to anything recently. And so I give Group B the edge in that sense. And really, like, of the 4 locks that we mentioned, or that I mentioned specifically, being OG, VP, EG, IG, OG is in their own group, and then VP, EG, IG are in the second Group B. And so between those 2 factors, I'd say Group B is the more heavily contested one.
Yeah, and I'm looking into it a little bit more. I do feel like Team Secret, as I mentioned at the top of the show here, is definitely a little bit of a struggle. Obviously the Kiev groups, they did fantastic, and then it all kind of fell apart from there. And they'll post the Manila Masters, they finished last place in that. So they've been having a little bit of a struggle. They definitely have a lot to prove at this event. So and then LFY, I will say, is actually one of these is a potentially upcoming Chinese team again. Afu joining the roster. He's formerly of Warriors Gaming Unity, one of their stars over there. So I'm curious to see how they do as well. But yeah, overall, just from what we know, Group B is down. And talk about Clutch Gamers, man. It's going to be another case of they had some great online events, but yeah, that's a good point.
Because, last event, like, not only you can say that they technically had a home field advantage, but at the same time, like, you're thrown right into the wolves in front of all your people, and you lose a game, and you're like, oh god, just let everyone down, all these people that I know and all these my countrymen. And so, I think it's the pendulum swings both ways as far as the home field advantage. But you get to go up in the groups still matter, but it's not as dramatic if you lose, and you get a lot more play time in general. And looking at what they have right now, they're going to be playing VP, IG, Planet Odd, and EG. And so, that's a pretty healthy group stage, if nothing else, just to play some high caliber teams. You may not win them, but at least you're going to gain experience. And that's the thing that they're lacking most right now, is experience.
Absolutely. They kick off against VP the very first game of the tournament, the home crowd team and VP. Yeah, that's quite the underdog story right there. So we'll see how they do, and hey, you never know. Maybe they can start strong. I know those SG Esports, they won the first game against OG at the Kiev Major, remember? So.
Anything can happen.
Exactly. Anything can happen. Well, again, going to be a lot of fun watching that. So that's an event that definitely I'm sure you'll be tuning into, as I know I will be, and look forward to that. But again, Tsunami, always appreciate it, man, and thanks again for joining me here.
Yeah, we'll look forward to some more casts later on, I'm sure.
So we're talking about all these events going on and all these tournaments happening, a lot of these third-party organizations that are putting on these events. Now, there's actually an interesting post that was posted a couple of days ago, even on Reddit, that definitely has brought us some discussion. His name is Bill. He's actually works for the Beat organization. They've ran many tournaments throughout the history of Dota 2. A lot of these online events. They've also done some LAN stuff. Most recently, the Northern Arena, which happened in November. I actually happened to attend that event. But the point is, he made a post concerning third-party tournaments, and something needs to be done to foster third-party tournaments, basically. Now, there's so many ways to look at this idea. The first is, are third-party tournaments necessary, right? I mean, that's just the first initial blunt question that I can think of. And when I ask myself that, it's tough, because I do get the value of third-party tournaments, and it helps increase the activity as a whole. Now, let's look at it from this perspective. If we did not have any third-party tournaments currently, if we were just simply relying on Valve to throw events for Dota 2 and that was it, we'd have what? We'd have the International. We'd have, in this case, the two majors. And I guess it depends if they're technically behind the Masters or not. I'm not 100% sure on that. But even if it is the Masters, so say the Masters, that would be 4 tournaments throughout the whole year. That takes up the span of 1 to 2 weeks each time it's put on. That's not enough, right? Now, there's, of course, if we didn't have third-party tournaments, if that was the case, I'm sure Valve would think differently about their overall system. But part of me would rather ultimately just see an organized league. And I've talked about this before, where I kind of want to see somewhat of that LCS equivalent. I think that would be pretty awesome. I think that would be almost the best way to really move forward as far as organization goes, as far as making sure we have the best quality content for both the players and the fans alike when it comes to watching Dota 2 as an esport. Because as it stands right now, it is pretty chaotic. We have all of these third-party tournaments going on, and it's one of the main reasons why I decided to create this show, was because as somebody that was coming into the Dota 2 scene, as I've always watched Dota 2 for the longest time, but I never was really, I was never very, very into it. I would watch the big events. I would watch the International, of course, and maybe a couple of these majors that happen throughout the year. But ever since I joined, I realized that there is just so much happening. And I've heard the complaint in the past that from players even that suggest that there's just too many tournaments happening. And I kind of laughed at that when I first saw that, just thinking like, is that really a thing? I mean, come on, there's no way that's possible. It is. It's very possible. There's just so much that's happening. And so it kind of forces these teams and players to choose, which obviously in itself is not a bad problem to have, right? You get to choose what you want to play in and when. But it puts everyone kind of in this tough spot at the same time, and it makes things very disorganized. I mean, hell, we got a couple of events coming up. The Galaxy Battles just announced that they're going to be the same weekend as the Summit 7. So all of a sudden now you have 2 pretty decent events, one with $100,000. Actually, I think they're both $150,000 prize pool on the line. One's in China and one's in Los Angeles. So again, from a spectator, I guess we can be excited about that, but are we though? Because is that really, getting us the best competition ultimately, or something that, we should really be looking forward to? I mean, I am, because I watch a lot of Dota in general, but as far as the casual fan that just, watches Dota for these big time matches, there's maybe not as much opportunity as you would think when you really break it down, because there are so many third-party events that teams like the OG, like EG, they're not necessarily going to all these teams with these biggest fan bases are not actively participating in them. So, I'm kind of going off right here, so I apologize for that. But I guess it really all comes back to just third-party tournaments and whether or not they are needed and are even necessary. If Valve isn't willing to put on a full structure and really get things organized when it comes to a full-on league of sorts and player contracts, and I don't think they are, at least anytime very soon, then yes, I do think that third-party tournaments are absolutely necessary. And then if that's the case, what can be done to make sure that these tournaments are relevant and organized enough to where, it makes sense to have them working as they are. And, well, I mean, I guess that's why I'm going to be joined by Bill here to actually talk about that and get his thoughts on that, and maybe get some ideas as far as where he thinks the third-party tournament scene needs to go and what needs to happen here. How's it going, man?
Good. Thanks for having me, Nick. Appreciate it.
Yeah, obviously, this is coming off of, well, first off, you're a fun guy to talk to. You've been around the scene for a while. Of course, just happy to have you on in general, but you did make a post here recently on Reddit, as I was just referring to, concerning third-party tournaments and how some orgs are disappearing is basically what your title says there. And then it created some discussion here a couple of days ago, even when you made it. So first off, I want to start from the beginning. What was the premises for creating this post? Why did you decide to create this?
So I mean, the main premise was to create awareness around some of the issues with third-party tournaments that, the general public may not be aware of. So, from an outsider's perspective, everything looks pretty good. You're having the majors, which have great viewership, and a lot. You have a lot of third-party land still, but I mean, that doesn't necessarily equate to scene health, which was my main concern, right? So the current majors, they overshadow everything. I mean, in what other games is $150,000 a small prize pool, right? Like usually that's really big. So that's where it sort of came from. I spoke to a bunch of different organizers, smaller teams as well, and I decided to make a post. So
yeah, and like I said, it got plenty of traction, and wanted to talk about it here with you as a result. But first, let's actually take it back just real quickly too. People may not necessarily know who you are, so do you really want to go over exactly who Bill is? What do you do with the Beat organization?
Yeah, sure. I'm one of the co-founders of Beat. So we've been doing North American tournaments since probably about 2011. We've done a little bit of Overwatch as well, but we mainly focus on Dota 2. We've been stable in the Americas scene for a long time. So for the EU fans, you probably know us from the Northern Arena Beat Invitational in the November LAN as well. So
I actually had the chance to go to the Northern Arena back, that was back in November, I want to say.
Yeah, it was November.
Yeah, in the November timeframe there. And, living in Michigan, it was a fairly short flight over there to Montreal, but yeah, I had a great time there. It's in, this kind of goes off the idea of these third-party tournaments, specifically like the Northern Arena, where it definitely gets you a different feel, as far as with the players and having that interaction or being so close to the players, because with an event like this, it's kind of, it's nice to have these tournaments that break up what are these majors and masters and obviously the TI on top of that. So with the idea of third-party tournaments, is that something that why you think it's necessary for third-party tournaments to exist?
Well, I mean, under the current structure, there's not really a meaning for third-party tournaments. And what I mean by that is it's basically alluded to that you'll get an invite to TI or, a major, right? So, I mean, from my post, it sounded like a lot of people were saying, oh, you're just trying to force people to watch Tier 2 Dota. I mean, no, you don't have to watch anything. I mean, basically what I'm requesting or to look into is like either some sort of point system or say, Valve goes, okay, if you place first in this LAN, you'll get an invite to the major, or you'll get an invite to the major qualifier. Something like that where, there actually provides some sort of meaning to the tournament, right?
That's actually an interesting way to look at it. And, I think kind of a spin off of that idea, or really kind of just going further with what you're saying. Yeah, some kind of where if you go to Valve, or Valve has a system set up where you can go to them, you present them with a tournament that you're putting on, the prize pool of said tournament, and then they come back at you with, all right, this tournament's going to be worth, 1 point, or this tournament's going to be worth 3 points, 5, or whatever their point system is in the big scheme of things towards getting said invite. So we have more of a concrete way of determining who these invited teams are going to be, rather than just simply it being, up to them behind the scenes. So is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they have some sort of weighting criteria, but I mean, there's no transparency on it from like a viewer standpoint, right? So when someone's running a tournament, say a smaller one, technically it means absolutely nothing, right? So if it's an online tournament, it means absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things, other than maybe a hint at a regional qualifier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing could be said for LANs, right? Smaller LANs probably might not mean anything as much as a bigger LAN, right? So you don't know. Like it's just to provide transparency for viewers, right?
Yeah. I want to touch on the prize pool aspect that you mentioned there, because I know you brought that up in your post. You just brought it up here a couple minutes ago.
Sure.
So obviously with TI, $20+ million prize pool, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Will it be bigger this year? We're gonna have to wait and see. It's on pace to possibly, but there is that idea. We're eventually gonna hit that peak, right? We're gonna reach that limit, and then maybe it's gonna start going down a little bit over the years, and then people are gonna start flipping out because of that. So looking at the prize pool, what is that the downside you would say? And if so, is that really something that we should be concerned about? Or is that really that big of a deal? And what should they be spending the money on if not these prize pools then?
I mean, I think it's fantastic that, Dota 2, the crowdfunding brings so many different eyes to the tournament scene. I mean, the amount of coverage that Valve gets from TI is amazing, right? But the issue is with that is that everything else is overshadowed by TI. So the mentality is basically, if you don't finish, top 8 in TI, you're basically seen as a disbanded team, right? In other sports, if you make the playoffs, if you have a good season, you're not seen as a failure. I mean, sometimes you are, but whatever. That's another discussion. But I mean, again, going back to the point where $100,000 or $250,000 seems smalls now, I mean, it's just because TI is so big, right? That's the reason why. I mean, is it sustainable? I don't know. What's going to happen when TI doesn't reach or doesn't get bigger and better, right? Are people going to claim dead game? I don't know.
Well, that's the thing, though. It's that people will, and then that whatever. It's going to be under 20 million. Oh my god, dead game. But as far as Valve's concerned, I would think from their perspective, they're not necessarily worried about that, and they're gonna ride this out as long as they can, right? And that kind of brings up then the argument is Valve. Obviously, they've done plenty for the competitive scene, and they definitely do a great job with promoting it in a lot of ways. But how passionate truly are they behind this idea of really fostering the competitive scene in the long haul? Or are they just trying to, bank in what they have now with TI, and then eventually when it's done, it's done? So is that kind of the mentality you think Valve has, or do you think that they do have the mentality that they want to support the scene more, and thus they should be having a different system as a result?
No, I think definitely Valve wants to support the scene. I mean, from historically, they've always, they've created tickets, Dota TV, crowdfunding. I just think they need to get back into some of those things, and also create a little bit more incentive for tournament organizers to continue doing so. I mean, LD brought up a good point of just even including the stream into Dota TV. That alone, I think raises one of the majors by double viewership. I think it was Manila compared to Shanghai. I know Shanghai had other issues, but when you're including the stream inside the client, it's absolutely big for viewership. For us as a third-party tournament, I would rather have 1,000 extra views on my stream on Twitch than 25,000 in game, right? There's absolutely no way I can measure any metrics in Dota TV, unfortunately. It's just. Yeah. And I can't profit off it either. So from an organizer standpoint, there honestly isn't much reason for me to use it. But from Valve's standpoint, of course, it makes sense. They want people to use Dota TV. They want people to go into the game and use their client and watch. Of course, it makes sense for them, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that, because I was actually planning to head there next with the mention of LD and bringing up that point. And I know firsthand that also coming from the Han scene, we definitely did that with several of our events, and you could just tell the numbers that were increased as a result of embedding the stream within the client. Now, I guess there is the argument you got to be a little bit careful with that, because there is the autoplay idea of when somebody opens up their client that they just don't care about watching the tournament. Is that going to pop up in their face, maybe making them go to the watch tab and then select on that tournament, and then they'd be able to watch the stream from there? I guess could be even a little more appealing overall. But what about Dota TV, touching on that again, where this idea is brought up where possibly getting some kind of ad space within Dota TV with these third-party tournaments. Is that something that you think could be feasible, or would that not be anything that you'd be interested in?
Well, I mean, that could be potential too. I mean, I think in my post I said that, where we have, pre-approved slots for certain ads. I'm not saying, you run commercials all game. Just basically, non-intrusive, something that the viewers can, just still continue watching. I mean, the other issue is currently you can't measure how many people watch Dota TV. So in terms of analytics and measurement for like your sponsor, it's no good, right? So it would have to go hand in hand. So I think the stream, including the stream, would be probably a better option, easier. I actually saw a mock-up of it. I think someone tweeted LD, and Valve actually was supposed to have that feature, from what I understand, but it just never got into the game. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I wouldn't be surprised if they definitely have thought about it, or like you said, they've even done it before. So it's just a matter of actually incorporating it. And then I guess the argument is though, like, who do they give priority to? I mean, you understand what I'm saying? Because like where would it be then? Would it be in the watch tab, or would you prefer to see it like right as somebody opens up their client, like that stream loads up, maybe with the audio muted, but at least you're getting that view count?
Yeah, that's a challenge, right? Because from one standpoint, there's a lot of people who might not care about the tournament, and they just want to play Dota, and they don't want that extra intrusion.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be ultimately up to Valve with some feedback from third-party tournament organizers. Personally, I don't mind it in the watch tab because sometimes we get like 8,000 viewers in some of our games, and they're just all watching on Dota TV. So if it's by default loads up into the watch tab, that's fine. The other point is though, on the front page, currently third-party tournaments aren't really promoted, and it's just buried in the watch tab, right? So. Maybe something to show that there is a tournament going on as well. It's just all TI stuff right now, but which I understand because they want to raise the prize pool more, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the ultimate goal, and that's the Super Bowl event, not only in Dota but really in all of esports. It's safe to say when it comes to the big championship there. So I want to kind of go a different direction here as far as players, dealing with players. Being an organizer yourself for a while, and I'm sure you've had to deal with this yourself. Specifically, Dream League recently has had a couple of cases where they just announced a year ban on Team NP because they dropped out yet again of another event for them, back-to-back seasons here. You had Digital Chaos actually just announcing that they're dropping out. The previous season, you had several. Is there something that you think needs to be done when it comes to situations like that arising? Is there something that like maybe a organization that needs to be formed or whatever it may be to prevent that from happening, or is that just kind of something you have to accept as an organizer and deal with in case-by-case basis?
Under the current system, that's how you have to deal with it. It's basically a case-by-case basis. For Dream League, unfortunately, they even last November, I think they got a couple teams dropped out, and actually I think it was a lot of teams that dropped out for Dream League. So yeah, it's definitely happened them to a lot more. So I mean, if it's their tournament and if they see that they want to ban team for a year, that's more than fair for them, honestly.
What about, I guess, playing a devil's advocate almost with third-party tournaments? Is there a point where there's maybe just too many third-party tournaments going on? Because, again, it kind of goes back to what I was just saying right there, where the reasons why those teams dropped out is because other events ended up happening or, kind of overlapping, and they just took priority. Is that a fair concern that if you just promote all these third-party tournaments and allow them to just be created, that we're getting to a point where there's just going to be an overwhelming amount that just is not, it's just too much, as crazy as that is to say?
Right. I guess that's a fair concern from like a viewer standpoint. So I guess the reason why you're seeing so many LANs in the summer months is because there's one constant. TI is always usually in August, right? I mean, that's the constant. So you can definitely plan around those months for your LANs. The unknown factors are though when you're planning for like say a November or December LAN, you don't know when the majors are. Mm-hmm. So it's much harder to plan for a LAN in basically from fall to spring than say summer. So that's why you're seeing so many LANs right now. I mean, communication could be a little bit better on Valve's part on that standpoint, and then it could spread out a lot better. So then you'd actually see fewer LANs during the summer months, and they'd be more spread out. That would probably be a solution. I mean, that could potentially help, right?
And this is actually just kind of something that I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. This kind of goes to the idea of the tier 2 scene, as you even labeled in your post. The tier 2 scene is absolutely dead. I mean, personally, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I do feel like that there are a fair amount of teams in this quote-unquote tier 2 that actually do have a chance to be a little bit active. There's online events like the Pro Dota Cup, amongst others, that do happen, that give said teams opportunity. Now, it's not the biggest by any means, and it's definitely not most ideal, but I feel like it is still there. But kind of going a little bit further with that is, would you be against the idea of being a third-party organizer and almost kind of being the tier 2 version of what the majors, because I'm looking at traditional sports, and you have like MLB, for example, you have the majors, those are the top teams, and then they have their lesser divisions, the amateur leagues, AAA, AA, whatever. They aren't as popular, but they still have a following, and it's still definitely necessary, if anything, to kind of foster these players and then build them up to eventually get to that top level. Is that something that you could see as feasible, or is that not something you would be interested in as an organizer?
Well, I mean, that's definitely feasible. I mean, if you look at CS:GO, they have a minor system already set up, where basically if you've made the major, you're not allowed to participate in the minor. So, or I forgot what the rules. I don't follow CS:GO that much, but they already have that in place. So, yeah, no, definitely that could be an improvement as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see if it's something like. But as whenever I happen to talk to somebody, an organizer like yourself, it just always goes back to, this continues to be a case of esports as a whole, and Dota 2 no different. I mean, we are still a very Wild West phase, as I like to say, and there's still so much to be figured out over time here. So obviously we're having a lot of fun with it, but there's definitely a lot of questions to be answered as a result of why you made your post in the first place. So, but Bill, I want to thank you for joining me, though. First, is there anything that you do have coming up with all this said? I mean, are you actually organizing something, or?
Yeah, we have some other stuff in Dota 2 in the works, but we're gonna wait and see what happens. But we do have some Overwatch coming up as well. So if you're an Overwatch fan, just stay tuned to our channel. Yeah.
Very cool. Look forward to all of that. But again, I want to thank you for joining me, and really appreciate taking the time to sit down and chat about the third-party tournament scene.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure, man.
All right, so thanks again for Bill for joining me here on the DotPro show. Definitely had some great insight there, and really does get me thinking as far as, as I had those questions before. And again, I do like the idea of perhaps Valve stepping in the sense of being a little more open in terms of how these tournaments influence set invite spots, because that is a really good point. Despite these being third-party tournaments, they are still impacting the big show, the big picture of both the majors and then the TI on top of that. So Valve really should be willing and wanting to be more involved of said third-party events if they're going to use them as these resumes, as these ways to help determine who their best teams are, and getting said invite spots, or getting invited to the regionals even. I mean, there's that level as well. That's something else that's not even, we don't even talk about too much. But of course, the TI7 invites in itself is the prestige thing. That's the top. But what about teams that you're inviting to the regional tournaments? I mean, there's these third-party events, especially the ones that are online, these smaller tier 2 tournaments, that do help determine that, you'd figure. So that in itself really should get Valve interested and willing to help and foster the third-party scene. And the ideas of simply embedding the stream in the client, I do think that there are some of those issues there, like I brought up, but maybe if you have it in the watch tab and separately like that could definitely help the idea of getting that viewership for the streams. And then the bringing back some sort of crowdfunding for the third-party tournaments is obviously something else that's very attractive, and potentially could be something that Valve may look into bringing back. I wouldn't be surprised. But all right, enough about that, though. We got one more thing to do here. We got to go over the competitive surge and go over things that have been happening in the competitive scene. And this is going to also focus on some roster changes that have taken place over time here within this last week even. Of course, again, the deadline getting delayed. But first off, we'll start with the Thunderbirds team. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Thunderbirds joins Planet Odd Gaming organization. Again, Planet Odd Gaming, apparently they were just formed very recently. Apparently they're backed by a casino, an online casino even. So I'm not going to lie, off the bat, I'm a little suspicious, but, best of luck to them, and we'll see how it works out. I will say this, I'm not a huge fan of the name. Planet Odd just seems, it doesn't roll off the tongue, right? It's not Thunderbirds, it's not Digital Chaos, it's not Evil Geniuses, it's Planet Odd. It sounds weird. I'm not a huge fan of the name, but it is what it is, so hopefully best of luck to them joining the organization there. Epicenter starts on June 4th. It starts this Sunday, guys, and I'm looking forward to that. I know everyone, if you're tuning into the show, I assume you are as well. It's a $500,000 prize pool tournament, as we're talking about earlier, and it is the most influential tournament when it comes to that TI7 spot, the TI7 invite, that is. So, and with, again, in my mind, I think OG and EG are the only two teams that are comfortable right now. So teams like VP, Team Secret, Liquid, all these teams definitely are going to have a chance to make a name for themselves here and really show that they deserve that invite spot. So, and this format is good for that. It's group stages, 5 teams in each group, best of 3. So you're playing at least 8 games in this tournament with the group stages alone. That's if you go 0-2 in all those games. So potentially you're playing between 8 to 12 games in groups. And then obviously if you advance on, more to come even. So a lot of games to be played against top tier competition. This is really a mini major in a lot of ways. So it's actually pretty cool that we're getting this with the Epicenter event coming up. The $250,000 prize pool, or prize, goes to first place of that $500,000 prize pool right there. But I think you could argue that, the money's nice, but yeah, getting that invite spot to TI7 is maybe not as important, but that's obviously a very, very big deal as well. All right, the Galaxy Battle Qualifiers is also currently going on. I mentioned that earlier. In fact, as you hear this, while I'm recording this, it's still wrapping up the European region, and the Americas will be later on tonight. But when you hear this, it's probably going to be done, so definitely check on the Wikipedia and get that information there if you would like. But right now, for the European region, Mouse Sports is actually in control. They're 5-2 record. They are sitting on top, but Vega Squadron, Empire, and Gambit Esports all have potential to either tie or even overtake them, depending on what happens from what I'm looking at right now. So it's going to be one of those 4 teams moving on to the Galaxy Battles. And then from the North American division, we have currently still 6 of the 8 teams able, but the favorites are Infamous and Team Freedom are no doubt the favorites. Actually casted a bit of this event yesterday. SG Esports is 1-2. They had a bit of a struggle. Their only victory was against Not Today, but they lost to Team Freedom, and then they lost to Team Red, actually. So not having the greatest time here in this event. Still technically in it, but yeah, Infamous and Team Freedom are your top dogs, and one of those teams will be going on to the Galaxy Battles tournament. Another tournament that's going on, the online event, Pro Dota Cup EU19. This is what I was talking about, how the Tier 2 scene, there is a Tier 2 scene, whatever you want to call it, an amateur scene, and I think it is very important to help and to make sure there is one. Organizations like Pro Dota do a great job at doing that, and they have a $3,500 prize pool. Most noticeable teams, you got Effect, Singularity, Danish Bears, and Pro Dota, amongst others, that are in this event. So definitely it's good to see that. And then going over to roster moves that have happened now, some of the bigger ones that took place post the deadline increase here. Swift Ending and Ping Vinsec, they actually left EPG, Elements Pro Gaming. So they're currently looking for 2 more players now to replace them with. Team Red formed, as mentioned earlier, with Zizzy, Monkeys, Newsham, Franz, and Jenkins. So I guess it's a mixture of the 4 Anchors team and then plus Jenkins, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not 100% sure. I was just informed of something like that. So point is, that's a new American team. M19, a gaming organization in Russia. They picked up ILTW, Funnick, Misha, Muriel, and Nix. So a couple of recognizable names right there. So we'll see how they fare in the CIS region. And then Gambit Esports Also picked up some CIS players, Daxak, Kuman, Cheshire Cat, Bingnum, and Always Want to Fly. So, again, if you follow the CIS scene as whatsoever, those are names that you should recognize. Joining Gambit Esports, yet another organization getting into the Dota 2 scene. So it's fun to see them there. Well, that pretty much covers it for the competitive surge and pretty much wraps things up for the show here today. So, once again, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for tuning in. A quick note on next week. Now, I personally, as I mentioned at the beginning, I am going to be on vacation. I'm going to be in Chicago having a good time. Thus, I will be unable to record my show for next week. However, the awesome people at DOTP, of course, they are going to be putting on some kind of show. I don't know exactly who's going to be the host or what they're going to do, frankly, but there will be a Friday content piece. Is the point. So look forward to that. But again, as far as the DotPro show, we will not be happening next week. We'll be coming back the following week to then recap Epicenter. And of course, looking forward to Summit 7 and Galaxy Battles Land. So there's gonna be a lot to talk about 2 weeks from now, that's for sure. So I do apologize in advance. But again, I know .P guys will do a great job at putting on some fun piece of content in place for next Friday at least. But once again, a big shout out to both Bill as well as Tsunami for joining me here on the show. Really do appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you guys next time on the DotPro show with BreakyCPK. I am BreakyCPK. Have a good night, guys. We'll see you next time.